Hey guys, Jessica Hardicke with Clover Meadows Beef here, and today we're going to talk about beef cuts. So one of the questions or comments that we hear from our customers a lot is that they get all these different beef cuts and they're absolutely confused by the naming structure of each cut, or they're not sure how to cook it. So we're hoping that this video might shed a little bit of insight on that. And then there's always our website you can check out for even more detail out there. So one of the things you're going to have to know about this video is that this will be somewhat of an anatomy lesson, because the way steak or beef is determined on if it's going to be tender, or if it's going to be more tough, it's going to be more juicy or not as juicy, really comes down to where that cut is located on the animal. So in other words, the anatomy. So cuts in the center of the animal are going to be a lot more tender, and we'll dive into that more. Just to get started though, here on my cutting board, I have 3 steaks. These are 3 of the most popular to be out there grilling. So we've got a ribeye, a strip, and a sirloin. They're all very different, although they're all favorite steaks. They're all going to taste a little bit different. And so if you have a ribeye, this is going to be the steak that's going to be the juiciest, most flavorful steak out there. It has the nice marbling that you see throughout that is characteristic of a ribeye. And that's going to be something that you would look for when you're grilling, or when you're at a steakhouse and you're trying to order what your favorite steak is. If you like a really juicy steak, go with a ribeye. You won't be disappointed at all. Next is your strip steak. This is an all-around steakhouse favorite. Kansas City strip, New York strip are some of the things that it's also known as, some of the names it's known as. Strip steaks aren't quite as bold and flavorful as a ribeye, but they still pack a lot of flavor, and it's a great option. Next on my cutting board is a sirloin steak. Sirloins are a little bit leaner than ribeye, and so going down, we're getting a little bit leaner as we go along. Again, the bold flavor, it's not quite as bold of a flavor as a ribeye, but it's still a really, really great steak to choose from. But it is a little bit leaner if you're looking for a leaner steak. So as this video continues, we're gonna flip over and show you a beef cut chart, because we think that'll be the easiest way to explain all the different cuts of beef. Now, the thing to remember as you look at this beef cut chart is that there are 8 primary regions of cuts of beef. And the USDA has done a really great job of dividing these all up so that it makes it a little bit easier to explain. And as we look at them, you're going to start to realize that some of the names that you see on these cuts will ring a bell with names of steaks and cuts of beef that you've heard. So for example, the 8 primal cuts are the chuck, rib, loin, round, flank, short plate, brisket, and shank. Now, after these 8 primal cuts, then beef gets divided into sub-primal cuts, which is a little bit smaller. And then after that, they get cut into individual sizes or portion sizes, which is what you would get if you purchased beef from us, or you were at a steakhouse or something. You're going to get a portion size of a steak or a hamburger or something like that. Now, the thing to keep in mind, like I mentioned before, is that the most expensive cuts are in the center, which is the loin or the rib section. And the reason for the center is because beef gets more tender as the distance from horn and hoof increases. That's a really important thing to keep in mind when you're shopping for beef. Because basically, a steer's legs and neck muscles do most of the work. So the muscles there are firmer, and that makes those areas tougher. The loin and the rib are at the center of the animal, and compared to the neck muscle, they don't work as much. So the areas in the center are a lot more tender. So an example of tender cuts from the loin and the rib are like a T-bone steak or a strip steak, a ribeye steak, a fillet. Those are just a few that you would find in the loin section. One of the key things to keep in mind is that an animal, a steer, cannot be all steaks. So a lot of times we hear from our customer, hey, I want to buy a whole cow, but I want it to all be steaks. Well, we can't do that, because as you look at this chart, you realize that there are 8 primal areas, and each section has to be cut a little bit differently, just because it's based upon how that muscle has worked for the animal. So the loin section is relatively small, as you can tell in the chart, compared to other sections. So you can't have a whole animal cut up as, let's say, filet mignons, because there's all this other part of the animal that still needs to be used. So if you have questions, please let us know. We hope this video has been a little bit helpful and educational as we walk through each of the cuts. We're always here to help, always love to talk about beef. leave a question or comments in the comments below. We've also, in the comments below, listed a link to some of our favorite beef charts that might help explain this a little bit more. And then in other videos, we also talk about how to cook each of these different cuts for the perfect method, because there are ways to cook certain cuts of beef, just certain cooking methods, to make sure that you always end up with a dinner that you are just excited to eat and really proud of. So again, have questions, please reach out. We're always here to help, and we love to talk about beef. Thanks so much.